This is a video about trying to define meaning and cognitive phrases and trying to be more precise about them and possibly showing way forward with artificial intelligence, how it could be further developed. I start with the subject of cognition itself and the idea that language is the window to the mind and to cognition. And meaning as such is always defined by linking different ideas and concepts together. You can see this when you look at a dictionary. You see a word is usually defined by other words. And how are they linked together? How is this meaning generated? There are different ways. Also, you've got this object, predicate, and subject structure, and it can be either linked together in the form of categories or giving properties to the object or defining the acts that the object does. And so it's basically about attaching characteristics to an object is the way of defining meaning. Look at categories, because this is an interesting, we had this just before. This is categories are objects which have common properties, quite simply. And this has the function, obviously, of disseminating information about properties among objects. So one doesn't have to say to each object what its characteristics, you just have to say what category it belongs to. It's a way of speeding up the dissemination of information in an agent or a cognitive system. The act we discussed, one should be clear about the fact that acts causes changes in the environment of the cognitive system, as in not in the cognitive system itself, but in its environment. So one has to be clear about this. And also it's important that the expected change to an act, which a cognitive system, let's call it that way, is necessary, and this allows also planning. And the environmental itself, one can define various elements in the environment. There can be things, and they have characteristics. So this is your characteristic linking. Beings, for example, they have the characteristics obviously too, but they can perform actions and they can reproduce. And there are also machines in the environment of a cognitive system. The difference there to a being is that they can't reproduce from this definition. Let's talk about the agent itself. What can agents do or a cognitive system do? They can answer questions, they can pose questions about missing information which they don't have themselves. They can give commands, they can take commands, do things. And they can also take explicit commands to learn things and then react to the environment. So it's sort of standard action. Consciousness is also a subject that comes up and down, but this is basically consciousness in my definition is just to hold information about the environment in a changing environment, and this is also important sometimes to have this context also. It's a way of holding the context also. We come to context itself in the memory of a cognitive system. Context is given by the temporal storage of the input. One can imagine new inputs coming into a cognitive system, and these are stored in the sequence according to as they occur, according to the time. And this in fact gives the context of a certain word that is used, for example, or a certain image that's seen, because it's only in this context has a certain meaning. And it's not about logical rules and or categories as such. It's just the temporal storage which gives to indicate what it's about, or the temporal occurrence of something. we look at dialogue, we can imagine cognitive systems or agents. They exchange information, and this is important for the social coordination of agents, and also for the dissemination of information between the agents. This also speeds up information dissemination in where a number of cognitive systems are together. We'll have a look at this subject of the Turing test. The Turing test requires that that a system must fool a human user that it's a human. And I'd like to widen the definition, use Luhmann's definition that says, basically Luhmann says that a system must be part of a closed loop of information with its environment, and then it's a system. And I think it's a more wider definition and more important definition than Turing's test. It's got to be useful for the environment. It's got to be engaged in the environment, and then it's a system. Imitation. This is also an important subject. There must be an external indication that that whatever's going on in the environment is good, that should be imitated in the future. And so there must be further information. One thinks about the mother smiling at a child when it's teaching it something, or if you listen to music or watch films, that music gives an indication if this is a good thing or a bad thing that's going on. So one just not only observes images or hears words, but there must be also indication if it's good or bad. And this is very important for society and also for learning of a cognitive system. Synonyms. This also is part of this object predicate subject structure and indicates also that a certain word is a synonym for another word, and this should be indicated in the memory of the cognitive system. Creativity and solving problems. Basically, one's looking at characteristics or looking for characteristics that belong to objects to solve a problem, or that have positive characteristics. And it's basically creativity is without a prescribed problem, where problem solving is with a prescribed problem. So that's my short video on the subject of trying to be more concise about cognitive expressions and terminology. I hope that was of interest.